Why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth. It was because here in this land, we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price.
Hi everybody, this is Nancie Orticelli from the Constitutional Coalition of New York State, and it's been a while since I talked with you all and wanted to give a little update on what's going on here in New York State as far as legislation and politics and exactly where we're headed in New York. And here's a hint, it's not a good place. I don't know how many of you know, but in June, we had primaries here in New York, and we had primaries for mostly Democrat positions. And in New York City, in and around New York City, there were quite a few primaries that took place, and the incumbent Democrats who have held power and positions of power for some of them about 40 years, they were primaried, and they were primaried obviously by other Democrats, because that's what a primary is. However, there's a little twist this year as to what kind of Democrats actually primaried the incumbent Democrats. And that twist is the Socialist Democrats, specifically the Democrat Socialist of America. It's essentially a third party operating within the second party of the Democrats. And surprisingly, they have won many of their primaries by landslides, and I'm going to talk you all through a few of these Democrat Socialist biographies and backgrounds, and also what their plans are for the state of New York. So the first one I actually want to hit on is Zohran Mamdani. Now, Zohran won over Arevella Simotas in the New York 36th Assembly. Arevella is a 9-year unchallenged incumbent, and Mamdani won with over 300 votes, and he claimed it was enough to not require a recount. And then after he won his primary, he took to social media, specifically Twitter, and he tweeted, "Socialism won." Now, he was backed by the Democrat Socialists of America, and the primary for the Republicans for this district was canceled, all but guaranteeing that Mamdani will win in November. The Democrats actually poured over $125,000 into this specific primary. Now, make no mistake, what I said before, this really isn't the dyed-in-the-wool Democrats that we're used to. These are socialist Democrats. Mamdani's campaign ran on the promises of housing for all and state-run rent control. He also ran on the elimination of cash bail. He said, quote, "I am running for state assembly because it's time to guarantee housing to all New Yorkers as a right, regardless of ability to pay. It's time to desegregate our schools," which, in my opinion, I thought we already did that. I don't know what the 60s were all about in the civil rights movement, but he also wants to fully eliminate cash bail, ban solitary confinement, fund and fix the MTA, end workplace discrimination, and fight for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice for the many, not the few. His campaign slogan, interestingly, is called Roti and Roses, which is a derivative of a popular campaign slogan, Bread and Roses. Roti is an Indian flatbread, and it was interesting because bread and roses, the campaign slogan, was commonly associated with a successful textiles strike in Massachusetts in 1912. It's often referred to as the bread and roses strike. So the slogan pairing bread and roses appeals for fair wages and dignified working conditions. And the fact that this man has taken this slogan and changed it to roti and roses, and like I had said earlier, roti is a form of Indian flatbread. Not everybody who lives in New York is Indian. So right away, that is a segregating slogan. And in my opinion, it is pandering to only one group of constituents instead of representing the whole. And that is really what these socialists are all about. They're all about doing away with Americana and doing away with what we have been since the beginning and making it into their own little mini versions of the countries they came from, which you may agree with it, you may not. I'm just telling you what it's all about. The second socialist who won her primary is Emily Gallagher. She beat 46-year veteran Joe Lenthal in the 50th Assembly District. She's another candidate who is for housing rights. She supported the Occupy Wall Street movement, and she canvassed for Bernie Sanders. And this is what she says. She says, I'm kind of a goody two-shoes, and I really like rules. I also like to figure out when people aren't following the rules. That's my favorite hobby. Well, you know, Emily, I'd like to let you know of somebody who doesn't follow rules. What about the governor, Andrew Cuomo? You can go after him. He doesn't like to wear masks in public. He wears them below his nose during press conferences, as he showed us the other day with his press conference for the Greek Orthodox Church building. So go after Andrew Cuomo. That would be really great. If you're going to go after somebody and you're going to win this primary, why don't you do what the people want? And in spite of what people say, the polls are not correct, because I don't know anybody who's been polled, have you, saying that Andrew Cuomo is a great governor? Anyway, so she also she was not officially endorsed by the Democrat Socialists of America, because what they're doing is they told her they're trying to endorse people of color, and they say that's why endorsements are not given out to all worthy socialists. That in and of itself is also discriminatory for the Democrat Socialists of America to say that. They say that they would only give out endorsements to people of color no matter if somebody else is a worthy socialist. I don't know that you can have those two words side by side, but hey, whatever. So she also is anti-Lyft, anti-Airbnb. And she said that as a middle-class person who often juggles multiple day jobs and was recently laid off because of COVID-19, she knows the consequences of this sort of politics. She said if she hadn't lived in a rent-stabilized apartment, she wouldn't be in her neighborhood anymore. She said, I might not even be in New York City anymore. And that's not because this isn't my home. It's because of displacement. I'm sorry, Emily Gallagher of the 50th Assembly District, but you don't know what displacement means. You don't live in a war-torn country yet where you are forced to go into a refugee camp. That's not called displacement. That's called having to make a change because you can't afford your apartment anymore. That's called real life. That's called not getting a participation trophy. That's called putting your nose to the grindstone and working for what you have. You don't know the meaning of displacement, Emily Gallagher. You don't have a right to live in somebody else's building rent-free because of a pandemic. And let me just say this, if you lost your job because of the pandemic, shouldn't you have been getting unemployment plus the extra $600 a week? So there's no reason why you would have been, quote unquote, displaced, Emily Gallagher. The third socialist is Farrah Forrest. She's another tenant activist, and she beat Walter Mosley in the 57th Assembly District. This is a quote from her. It was a long wait, but today we can finally say that we did it. Together, we made history by electing a socialist nurse in the middle of the worst pandemic in 100 years. Was that something we were trying to do? She acts like we've been waiting for that specific criteria for 100 years. Finally, we have a socialist nurse in the middle of the worst pandemic in 100. Finally, yes, finally. We've been waiting for that. Weird. She also states that she fundamentally, this is a quote, fundamentally does not believe in rent. Interesting. Well, I fundamentally do not believe in socialists, so let's get rid of them all. The fourth is tenant organizer Marcella Mataines. She overthrew incumbent Felix Ortiz in the 51st District. Ortiz is actually the assistant speaker of the House. He's second in power to Carl Heastie, and Carl Heastie poured funds into Ortiz's campaign to no avail. So make no mistake, Democrats, your speaker is on the chopping block by these Democratic Socialists of America. You have something that you need to fight for now. Give me an old-fashioned Democrat any day over a Democrat socialist. So one thing these people are calling for is rent suspension during the time of the pandemic and sometimes after that. They state it's the federal government's responsibility to take care of the people. I got news for you. It is not. It is not the federal government's responsibility. Read the Bill of Rights, read the Constitution, and then you'll find out what the government's responsibility is. The fifth and final socialist I'm going to cover is Jessica Gonzalez Rojas. She's for redistricting, and that is terrifying. What we have in the Assembly and the Senate right now is a majority. We have a majority of Democrats. When these Democrat socialists win in November, and believe me, they will win because there are no Republican challengers for any of these Democrat socialists. The Republicans do not have anybody in place. The Republicans have focused all their efforts on Chris Jacobs for the 27th congressional district due to the fact that Chris Jacobs is a millionaire, and he has also offered his money into the coffers of the state Republicans. So that is why the Republicans have not even focused on anything else. They don't have the money, they don't have the manpower, and that's really sad and scary. So what's going to happen after November is they're going to be a supermajority in the Assembly and the Senate, and they're going to redistrict all of the districts. Some of your favorite conservatives will possibly be redistricted right out of everything. We in New York are in trouble. We are very much so in trouble. And if we as conservatives do not start taking a stand and start running people who can take these Democrats and Democrat socialists on, we will never see New York State the way that we want to again. We will not have freedom. You will not have the opportunity to grow a business. You won't have the opportunity to buy property and rent it out and make money on it. The real estate industry is on the chopping block as well for these Democrat socialists. They do not like real estate companies. They do not like real estate CEOs or moguls. They are coming after you all. And strangely enough, a lot of these incumbent Democrats that they beat were in the real estate industry. It's very interesting. Well, anyway, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas is for redistricting, free college, bail reform, housing, rent freeze. She beat Michael Dendecker of the 34th Assembly District. Now, she is the CEO, or was, for the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health, which they fight for reproductive justice. Quote, at the Latina Institute, we amplify Latina voices to change the narratives that seek to tear down the inherent power that resides in our communities. We center Latinas in order to transform the systems that influence our ability to fully make decisions about our bodies and our lives. We do this by building our activist base, shaping policy at the local and national levels, and shifting culture to dismantle the derogatory myths about our communities in order to help fuel a larger reproductive justice movement. Folks, that's a lot of words. That's a lot of malarkey. Feel-good words for killing an unborn child. That's all it is. That's all it is. When you look up this website for this National Latina Institute, it says a lot about reproductive justice. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? Where's justice needed for reproduction? It's needed, in their opinion, to be able to legally slaughter and murder our tiniest neighbors, tiny human beings in the womb. What about their rights, folks? What about their rights? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, life. Scientifically, life begins at conception. There is no magic day that all of a sudden a human fetus becomes a baby or a life. This woman is for death. And if she wins and these Democrat socialists are allowed to continue unchecked, New York State is headed for death. There were 44 Republican primaries canceled in the Assembly this year, compared to only 12 that the Democrats canceled. I think that they can afford to cancel the Democrats since they have the majority. They want to redistrict, folks, and in order to redistrict, they need you to fill out the census. And I am here to say, don't do it. Do not comply. The Republicans aren't the only ones in trouble here in New York. The Democrats are as well, and you may think that's a good thing. It's not. We know Republicans are in trouble and virtually rendered impotent in pretty much any political arena in the state right now. But I would say give me a Democrat over a socialist any day. There's literally no incentive under this ideology. All there is the motivation to do nothing and accept free everything. Schooling, housing, healthcare, childcare, murdering your unborn child, the list goes on. Where is personal responsibility? Where is the feeling you get when you accomplish something you've worked hard for? There is none. There's only participation trophies and the free stuff. The Lord created us to work and be fruitful and condemns the lazy. The Bible says idle hands are the devil's playmate. That's where crime comes into the picture here. Not only crime, but depression, anxiety, all of it. All from not being able to make something of yourself due to hard work and ethics. Ronald Reagan said this, folks. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-thought lessons of how they, in their lifetime, must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.